Hello and welcome. We have a fun episode today. We interviewed a member of the Meld team for a conversation in the Crypto Garden, but these conversations are so good that more and more I think I'll be putting them on Uncomplication as well. So if you're interested in more of this content, join us in the Crypto Garden. In this conversation, myself and my co host Bandito talk to Ken Uling, who is the chairman and co-founder of Meld. Now, this was a connection that was made in the garden. We had someone reach out who has a lot of connections in the Cardano sphere. So this is not a paid promotion. Meld did not pay us to interview them or to promote their project. We were interested to talk with companies in the Cardano ecosystem that are trying to bring value to the world in the form of DeFi and other applications. And so Meld is a building block type product that itself will eventually be a DeFi lending and place that you can put your crypto and actually borrow against it. But they're also plugged into the larger Cardano ecosystem so that Ken's team is interacting with a lot of the other teams in the space to build these primitives, these building blocks that can then be taken and used to build other products, other tools, and all with the objective of creating access to capital for people that currently don't have that same access with the traditional financial products that exist. So I hope you enjoy this interview. We're just going to play it largely uncut, almost like a podcast. So if you're driving or jogging or going to bed, this is a great thing to just play and let run. It's a pretty long conversation, but we dig deep into a lot of different corners of DeFi and Cardano and the crypto market. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Thanks for tuning in. Cheers.
the the functionality of DeFi was so obvious and so understandable. It was very consumable. You could explain it to pretty much anybody. Look, here's a money flow, and you get a percentage of that money flow because you bring value to it by doing X, Y, or Z. And so that was super appealing because it made it more accessible, it made it more meaningful, it made it easier to explain business cases. And so that, in combination with the industrial technology side, led me to meet Hai, my co-founder. So at the time, Hai was writing AI software for drones for the British military. And he had a team of 5 Haskell developers. And he'd been working on and off in regards to crypto on various different projects like Indigo Protocol and Tezos, and as well as working directly on contributing to the Cardano blockchain. And so we started talking around the idea of some sort of industrial application for an Oracle to sort of help businesses share data better. But that just didn't feel right. It didn't feel meaningful. It was very difficult to explain the value proposition. And I had been throwing around the idea of what Meld ended up becoming in my head because I had a lot of friends that were doing crypto investing. And as 2020 progressed and the bull markets sort of started taking off, their portfolios started to swell. And as their portfolios swelled, they invested more. And so they were all, without exception, they were all fiat poor and crypto rich. And so I would go out with a couple of them and, I'd have to buy dinner, but they'd have, a portfolio that's worth 3 times my house. And so it was kind of this almost comical contrast. And so that kind of got me thinking on how to solve that problem. How can you address this issue? And of course, it led me to things like BlockFi and Nexo and these guys. But I'd really bought into the idea, and these opinions I have were very much mirrored by Hai, in that we believed in the idea of DeFi. We believed in the idea of decentralization. You saw the sort of aftermath of what is it called? GameStop had an issue, all the issues with GameStop, it just became so clear that decentralization, non-custodial was a set of values that were very, very worthy of pursuing, and that people, they cared about that. It was something that was very important to them. And so then over a period of several months, Hai and I were sort of talking about what this could be. He started to build prototypes and we tested them in 2020. Then we sort of matured it and did more work on it. And then in sort of, I guess, around March of 2021, we built a deck and we started putting teams together outside of the technology side, because I mean, it was kind of a dream team, right? He was a team of 6 Haskell developers. Where do you find 6 Haskell developers in the same room? Yeah. So it dropped in my lap, and I was hell bent on making sure that I turned that into something that was meaningful and had some sort of impact. And so then we started to talk to other people in the crypto space. We started to present the deck, and it got a kind of reaction that we did not expect at all. I mean, everybody understood the problem. Everybody saw the product market fit. Everybody, it was kind of obvious because we were speaking to people that held crypto. And if you hold crypto, at some point or another, it crosses your mind. You look at your portfolio and you're like, okay, well, I'd like to do something with this. I'd like to buy a house or get married or whatever, but there's no way in hell I'm going to sell it. Hmm. And so this idea of being able to use a smart contract to lock up your collateral and then borrow fiat against that became the sort of rallying cry. And that's how the kind of protocol was built up as to how we can sort of do these things. So we were definitely looking towards Ethereum. Obviously, everybody is. It's the sort of big brother. It's the mature. Their principles are what we're all driving for. But one of our goals was to create as capital efficient system as is possible. We wanted something that was super, super efficient. We were not going to be able to create something that would appeal to a broader audience when your sort of gas fees are $100 a transaction. And it just didn't work for us, because that might work fine if your portfolio is, $10 million or $1 million. But if your portfolio is $500, $600, $800, then that's a no-go. That's a non-starter. And so we knew quite early on that we were not going to go into the US market. We were going to focus on the rest of the world. We saw that sort of Nexo, Celsius, BlockFi, they had sort of the US market, that very sort of focused on that area, focused on US-based KYC. And we saw statistically 61% of all investors are outside of the US. So we decided it's much better to focus on there than to focus on the United States. And so therefore we were sort of looking at a much, much smaller portfolio size. If you look at South America, if you look at Africa, if you look at Asia, a lot of these investors are very, very young. They have very small portfolios. So you have to have very highly capital efficient systems. Then, we knew that we were going to go on to Cardano because of a lot of the basic, benefits that are sort of touted about it. But when we started to look at the business models around it, when we started to figure out how the L1 was going to really help us take advantage of the type of business that we wanted to do, that's when Cardano really started to sing for us. I had no idea that it was going to be as fruitful a decision as it ended up turning out to be. So we're doing this ISPO, initial stake pool offering, only doable on Cardano. We're providing a specific type of a loan that's a negative 1% interest loan. We can do this because we're on Cardano. We're working with World Mobile in Africa, and we're working on special financial instruments for them. The way we can do this, we have low capital efficiency. So all of these things coming together really kind of define the shape of it. And it has been sort of it has taken off so much more and so much harder than we had ever expected.
Hmm. Well, I have to say, you're kind of an interviewer's dream because I have an outline of questions here, and I think you've gone through the first, set of 10 questions in order from how I had originally phrased it. So I love that you've covered, the lead in here of, how and when this became a problem in your life that you saw other people having, and I can definitely resonate with that, especially a few months ago where there is a propensity to move a lot of your fiat dollars that were previously in the bank into these crypto projects, and then you're kind of stuck until you, choose to move that out. Do you see that particular use case and that pain point as strongly now after we've kind of had a first market cycle top versus where it might have been in March when everything was in the green and there was a lot more reason to hold on to everything? What does it look like to really lock up your crypto when the market's going down or sideways instead of up?
So this is the part of the work that we have to do as Meld, which is to try and talk to the market, because a lot of people are very, very young. They've seen huge gains, but they don't have much of a financial background. If you talk to a finance person and you ask them, what do you do in a down market? Borrow in a down market. You borrow in a down market. If you have a long position and you've sort of seen huge gains, you see this in my case at least. I don't have any by a big portfolio by any stretch of the imagination, but when we had this flash crash, I didn't sell. You hodl. I mean, that's what you do. So when there's a bear market, you hodl, but you still have to live. So that's when you borrow in a bull market, you're speculating. You're sort of playing a very aggressive position in the market. When it's a bear market, you're sort of doing this, you're getting this fiat, not to sort of speculate, but to live. And so I think that when it comes to the bear market, the value proposition that Meld has is much more meaningful. It's less about, okay, I can kind of pretend or pseudo leverage myself or hedge myself, depending on how you want to look at it. What I can do is I can actually keep my position and I can still live my life, even though it's gone down, because I know, the next bull market is going to happen in whatever years, and then I'll be able to get back into my position. As long as the sort of lending and borrowing products are friendly or balanced or sort of honest, then I think that is the best way to go. And debt financing is how the world works. Large corporations do this all the time. They buy huge, very expensive assets. They borrow against them. Why do you borrow against them? Because the interest on your loan is tax deductible. And the thing is going to appreciate in the long run. So it's going to be only a win-win for you. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to provide these instruments to the mass audience. We want to give this ability to do simple debt financing to normal people instead of just, huge multinationals. And you can only do this when you have this kind of efficiency and you have this openness. So yeah, I think that it's if we do a good job, then it will benefit everybody. And this is one of the things that we see with the blockchain in regards to the transparency. With the case of BlockFi or Celsius, one of the reasons they didn't work for us is because they're black boxed, right? So they're CeFi, they're centralized. You don't know what's happening behind the screen. They're sort of, in control. They're sort of doing all kinds of strange things, rehypothecation, etc., on those assets. When it comes to being on DeFi and on the blockchain, then everything is transparent. What that means is you have two parties. You have lenders and you have borrowers. And the borrower wants to get as cheap a rate as they possibly can. They want to spend as little as they can in order to borrow against this. The lender wants as much as they can. And the way it works in the banking world is these two groups are completely abstracted and separated. So you have the bank in the middle. And so the borrower never actually thinks about the role of the lender, and the lender never thinks about the role of the borrower. But in this case, because everybody shares the same governance token, you don't have a protocol if the lender doesn't make money and the borrower doesn't have, cheap access to capital. So because both of these parties can see one another, they can actually strike a better balance, because if there's no borrowers, the lenders make no money. And if there's no lenders, then there's no money to borrow. And so I think that this openness will provide a better perspective for all players involved, because you have lenders and borrowers voting on the same, same proposals onto the protocol. Is this going to change it in this way? If it changes it so dramatically in the favor of the borrower, then the lenders, they'll all just dry up and walk away. And because the borrowers can see that, they understand then that, they are part of an ecosystem that has to have a balance.
So I love the way that you answered that question, because one of the things that I've noticed, and it's been a learning process and a point of frustration in talking to other people, is that I feel when individuals are introduced to crypto, it is usually in a bubble, and it is purely based on this buying and trading aspect. And so it's a lot harder to give practical financial advice to people on how this can fit into your life. It might actually replace a bank account, or it could be the way that your kids go to college or you buy a house. And it was exciting to hear you get kind of passionate about that misconception. The intelligent way, what financial people do is to borrow when things are trending down. As you've gotten into this space, can you maybe share a little bit deeper what you see an actual future looking like, where the average person is holding crypto, and organizations like yours and others have actually educated this population on how to safely enter the market, how to safely acquire the assets, store the assets, borrow against them? What's happening today in this market, and what would you like to see the future look like for an average person interacting in crypto?
Well, I mean, the first thing that I want to see, and that everybody I know at least is looking for, is for lower transaction fees. That alone, I think, is going to help tremendously with the kind of the sticker price of crypto, in the sense that if you're doing your first transactions, let's say you're doing your first transactions last week, and it's kind of a lukewarm sort of uptrending market, and you sort of accidentally happen to do your transactions as the US is waking up. So your gas fees are going to be $80, $90, $100 for a transaction. These kinds of things, I think, are a huge put off in regards to the market. So getting those things down with things like Polygon and, ZK rollups and all these kind of L2s, I think is going to help tremendously in regards to getting people engaged and sort of involved in the market. I think that we want to make, on one hand, we want to make it very, very accessible and very usable, very easy to interface, very easy to work with. And this is our second most important principle at Meld, is usability. And obviously I have a sort of background in that area, so it's my wheelhouse. I can work that. I feel very confident in that area. But on the other end of the spectrum, on the other side, it's even more exciting, in the sense that this concept of composability and financial primitives and money Legos, and the fact that 16-year-old kids that are gamers in their bedroom have a better understanding on how to build these money Lego solutions. That's really where it gets super, super exciting, and what I'm most fired up about. One of the products we have is called a Genius loan. And the Genius loan is a loan that pays itself off. And so what you do is a crypto to fiat loan, and you take your crypto and you lock it up. And that crypto then goes into a liquidity pool, and you get yield from it. Some of that yield goes back to pay off the principal of the loan. The customer still has to pay the interest on the loan, but remember, in most countries, the interest is tax deductible. And so when we say that this is a self-paying loan, the first reaction most people have is, that's too good to be true. It's da, 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 all this kind of stuff. And if you just take like one step back, and we went through this entire process ourselves, where we started out, okay, we're going to do loans, and there's interest, and there's this, and there's this. But if you just take a minute to sort of think about it a bit sort of broader, traditionally in the lending and borrowing space, you have somebody who's providing a loan, and then they get interest from that. But the collateral that you put up for that loan, they're going to take that and make that collateral work for them. They'll get anywhere from 5 to 30% return on that collateral. But they take all of that as profit. They don't give any of it back to the person providing the collateral. So because we're working on a sort of a transparent platform, because both of these actors are able to see one another, we're in a position where we can create a more even or more fair type of a product, because the person that is providing the collateral can easily go look into that liquidity pool and see how much is being earned off of this collateral, because it's all open. And so if we take some of that and give that back to them, we're making more people interested in borrowing. So that means you have more people on both sides, lending and borrowing side. And I mean, who in their right mind wouldn't want to have a self-paying loan? And it just means that the protocol is not as sort of, what would you call it, revenue greedy as it would be in another context. And so we want to create those kinds of solutions, and we're not going to have all the answers. It's not going to be Meld that sort of comes up with this stuff. We want to be a primitive in the space, and we want to see other people put Meld and other things together to create new solutions. But while we're doing that, we're going to continue to try and take this step back and look at the world in a different way. We see that there's a market in Africa and South America for microloans, and I don't believe that getting people out of poverty, or I don't believe that you can sort of, the solution for getting people out of poverty is giving them a loan. I think that there are other more interesting, more creative financial instruments that we can build that will help in that area. And so I think that's going to be some of the most exciting things that we're interested in doing, is figuring out, in the same way that we sort of worked out this idea of the Genius loan, how else can we take this kind of one step back and look at the financial instruments and just make a small tweak to them in order to get them to work harder for all parties involved.
Hey, Ken, this might be a good time to ask how Meld plans to tackle the problem of impermanent loss when borrowers are locked into these smart contracts, and over collateralized loans.
So they're not over collateralized. Yeah, over collateralized.
Oh, they're 2X.
Yeah. No, yeah. They're over collateralized. So impermanent loss was kind of a focus, and is kind of a focus of mine in regards to the AMM space. And we were looking at lots of different ways of trying to solve them. And we ended up falling back on something similar to what Bancor does, in the sense that we're in control of our LPs, our liquidity pools. And most of them are going to be very, very long-term liquidity pools based on sort of our customers and our types of loans and things like that. So we're not going to have that much of an issue in the long run when it comes to impermanent loss. Obviously, it's impermanent. That said, the Meld protocol has stake pools, so you're able to stake your Meld, and then that stake pool operates kind of as insurance against impermanent loss. So 40% of all the fees on the protocol go towards paying yield to those stake pool stakers. And then as a result of them exposing themselves to risk to cover any potential impermanent loss that might come about through our LPs. So we're not DEX. We're not providing the sort of, a similar solution in regards to that. But we will have LPs in order to handle yield and work with some partners. But all of our focus is very, very long term, in the same way that Bancor has their insurance, where after I think it's 100 days, they cover 100% of the potential impermanent loss. So we're really we're building on a lot of other existing platforms or existing protocols and thinking in the DeFi space, trying to add some of our own thought to it and then sort of evolve all of it as a sort of singular protocol.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about the DeFi space as a whole. I think this year especially, and in 2020, it was the central focus for a lot of people in crypto as far as a new space to move into. And it feels a little bit like that excitement is now being tempered a bit by concerns of regulation in the US and other places. Now, I know that you're actively addressing markets outside the US, but do you have any thoughts on potential challenges to the DeFi space as a whole, or what you see the future of DeFi looking, maybe three years down the road?
I mean, for me, like I said before, in 2020, DeFi was super attractive. It just made complete sense all the way around the table. So I've bought in wholeheartedly in regards to DeFi, what it stands for, how it works. I do believe that some aspects of KYC are super important. It's not about tax evasion or any of these kinds of other sort of, stereotypes related to crypto. I think it's related much more to the idea of self-sovereignty. And so I think that self-sovereign identity is something that we're looking at that is very, very interesting in the DeFi space, has the potential to be a kind of mitigating force in between the, regulatory fears from the DeFi space and the regulatory fears from the regulators. And so this is where we're sort of focusing some of our interests. We're not doing any of this. We're looking to have partners that do SSI. But I think that that's hopefully going to be a safe and good middle ground for this issue of regulation. From our perspective, what we're interested in is we're interested in financial activity for all sort of levels of society. So as long as we can achieve that, and we're focusing on markets where those are doable today. So our company is based in Singapore. We're under Singaporean law. I do believe that the US will probably get there as well. When and how it gets there and how bumpy the road is going to be a big question. We want to sort of participate in that dialogue, but I think we have to wait right now because, going into the US for us right now would be like trying to boil the ocean. And we just need to be very aware and very humble about what it is that we're doing and how we're going to get there. We have a very long-term goal, a long-term focus for the protocol. We have our sort of short-term deliveries, but our big focus is 2025, 2026. So we see the long view. And I don't think DeFi is going anywhere because I think we're just starting to see the potential for financial innovation. And this is what really attracted me to DeFi, was that there's no gatekeepers, there's no degrees required in order to define a protocol that can do perpetuals or derivatives or whatever other financial instrument that somebody wants to come up with. This idea that if you have the idea and you can solve the problem, doesn't matter your age or where you came from, you can do this, you can deploy it, you can build partnerships with other protocols, and you can make these really fantastic instruments. That's what totally fired me up about the space. I don't think that we've seen this level of like massive innovation, yield farming, AMMs, new types of bonding curves. All of this stuff it's super, super new. I mean, we're standing in the middle of it. The real implementation of it came out in 2020. It's just a year ago. So this, we're just at the starting point, and you're seeing a lot of these trends are common trends you'll see in lots of other places. So right now you have like Uniswap, right? You have Uniswap 1, which is great. Boot did this thing, set everything out there. Wow, it's fantastic. Uniswap 2, oh, this is sophisticated, so much better. And that sort of went for a long time. Now you have Uniswap 3, super high touch, much, much more technical, much, much more demanding in order to be able to manage your liquidity. You see this in all technologies. You have sort of the proposition that has been proposed. You have sort of the sort of value that is kind of realized, and then you have over complication, and then there's a pullback to sort of the core values, but in a more sophisticated way. I think you're going to see DeFi do these exact same curves in many, many different areas and many different ways. We might end up being one of those as well. Maybe we'll sort of do this kind of thing, and then we realize that, we've overcomplicated this part here, and we need to sort of take a step back and, think about it in a more simple way. But I think that you're going to see these kinds of trends all the way across the table. You'll see them in yield farming. You'll see them in, all kinds of different protocols, Aave and Comp, etc. I think that the other thing that you're going to see in DeFi, and you're already seeing, is this fork of the sort of main line of DeFi and then institutional DeFi, where you have, Comp going out now and working and building tools, Aave going out now and building tools specific for institutional customers, because institutions are demanding it. They're sort of reaching out to these protocols and asking for very specialized tools and specialized governance models and things like that. So I think that that's going to be, at least in a midterm sort of forecast or focus, you'll see a lot of these institutionalized tools. Probably you'll see them appear as the bear market comes in, because in the bear market, these big institutions still have huge amounts of liquidity, and they can get more efficiency out of it because they can then go into the DeFi space. And then when you finally get back to the next bull market, then you'll see this new generation of new types of primitives, new types of innovative solutions like yield farming, things like that.
That prompted one of the questions I had was, it sounds like Meld is positioning itself to be, like you said, a Lego block that other people can pick up and create new products, new solutions. When you look at, call it competition or whatever you want to call it, from the institutions that have traditionally been the source of loans and these financial products, do you anticipate that some number of them will actually come into the Cardano space? They'll actually be building financial products using Meld, using other tools? Or do you anticipate that when they start releasing products, they're actually going to be in competition to some of the more startup, smaller teams that are currently laying the groundwork?
I think existing lending institutions have no real incentive to go into the crypto space. They're doing, especially stateside, they're doing so well, and they have been for such a long time. In addition to that, the sort of culture is fundamentally different. When we started out and we talked to some of these, VP of lending in sort of commercial banks and stuff like that, the questions they asked were they were in such a different, they had such a different focus than we had. They had questions like, so what is your customer's ability to pay? I don't care. It's not my opinion. It's not my place to say that. They're giving me a 200% over collateralized loan. It's up to them what they want to do. I don't have to, I don't have to pass judgment on what or how they're going to use that capital, because it's a different kind of loan. It's a Lombard loan. It's not a risk-based loan. So these kinds of thinking, another one was, so how long are your loans? Well, some of our loans have no end. How can you do that? Why can't I? I mean, where does it say that your loan has to have a term? There's no reason for having a term. People can pay off the loan when they feel like they want to pay off the loan. So you can have a term if you want to sort of specify the sort of monthly payments, but you don't have to. In the case of the self-paying loan, the sort of Genius loan, it has no term. It just, over time, it pays itself off. You get a message in your Meld app saying, your loan has been paid off. Thank you very much for being a customer. Have a nice day. And so this idea of this the framework in which they work in, because they deal much more in sort of leveraged loans, much more in high risk and really, sophisticated risk modeling and risk management in regards to their leverages. It's just a different model. It's a different way of thinking. It's a different set of governance. Everything about it is different. And so I think it's going to take them an enormous amount of time to mentally shift gears in order to grasp how to work in this space and how these kinds of products are going to attract customers. We don't have that baggage. We don't come from the lending world. We come from the world of borrowing. We come from the world of DeFi. So we think about it from a more holistic perspective and a more sort of even perspective on from the lender's perspective and from the borrower's perspective, not from the protocol's perspective or from the bank's perspective.
Hey, Ken, I have a question
Yeah.
about KYC. We know it's a necessary evil when dealing with fiat currencies, and just curious how Meld plans to deal with that, whether they will require all users to KYC or only the fiat lending side.
At this point, we're only requiring fiat lending to have KYC. And so part of the reason for that is when you take out your fiat loan, the money gets wired to your bank account. The bank will not provide you with, they won't release that capital unless you can provide the documentation for that loan, all right? And so part of the KYC is to be able to provide all of the, KYC and AML documentation that the bank needs in order to be able to release that. So even if we chose not to do, or if we chose not to do KYC for the fiat side, then people just no one would get their money. So it's kind of a minimum requirement. In regards to the crypto to crypto, that's still sort of an unfolding dialogue. We have no idea how it's going to play out. We're going to do whatever is required to meet the legal sort of threshold. But as of right now, we're sort of following the same, what would you call it? The same protocols that like Uniswap, Aave, Comp, PancakeSwap, etc. All of these protocols are doing. So we're going to sort of follow that model, and we're not interested in sort of blazing a way forward in that area. We would just want to sort of work we want to work in as friendly a manner as we can, both with other protocols as well as regulators.
For sure. And as I understand, one of the products that you'll be offering is a debit card or a debit Visa. So would the potential be there to then take your fiat loan onto that debit or Visa instead of a deposit into your bank account?
So that's a separate product. So the debit card is connected to a line of credit. So what we're providing is you will get a line of credit, and then that will be based on however much collateral you have locked up. But the whole key here is that then you're paying interest on the monies that you've used, not the entire sum of the credit line. And that's the important distinction between those. So yes, if you wanted to, you could probably borrow all that money and then just use a debit card to use it. But it makes much more sense if you take out a line of credit for the same amount, and then as you use it, you'll pay the interest on just the parts that you're using. That way you have a chance to manage that more efficiently.
It's interesting to me. You talked about the banks and their initial questions coming from that the traditional perspective. As you are engaging new customers or potential customers, how do you have to educate them, because they're coming from that same system as well, and what are maybe some of the mistakes that people might make or ways that they might interact in a dangerous way to them financially in the DeFi space. Can you tell some stories about maybe, someone who has used this effectively, and maybe some ways that you could, borrow too much or get in a position where there is risk involved that maybe you didn't see coming because as a consumer you weren't educated on how the tool works?
Yeah. So essentially, there's 2 points here. One, we haven't launched yet, so we're still in development. We're still in the sort of fundraising phase. So we plan on launching the protocol in November, December, depending on how the smart contracts roll out on Cardano. That said, what you're basically saying is, how are we going to handle liquidations? So in this case, you have margin calls. So when and if the loan to value ratio goes too high, goes above 50%, then you will get a margin call. You'll get a message saying, please, either add more collateral or pay off a bit more of the loan, or, make some adjustments so that we can keep that loan to value, that LTV, at 50%. So there are 3 margin calls that happened as that loan to value goes up and up and up. And then at the 85% mark, there's a liquidation event. And so from our perspective, liquidation events are the worst possible thing that can happen on the protocol. We don't want to execute liquidation events if it's at all possible. Liquidation events will be more prevalent in the beginning than later on in the protocol, because as the protocol matures, the treasury for the protocol will increase, and then that treasury is used to hedge against market volatility in various different ways. And so remember also that by and large, crypto goes up and to the right. It might go up and to the right slowly, but it goes up and to the right. And so when you take out your loan, that loan to value will slowly but surely continue to go down as the value of that crypto that you've locked up slowly goes up. So the longer you have your loan, the less likely of a margin call or liquidation event that will happen. And so we're trying very hard to have these margin calls to mitigate potential liquidation events. And we're setting the loan to value ratio at 50%, which is, you could say it's, too high to have double the collateral. But from our perspective, yes, it's very high to have the double the collateral, but our goal is to never touch your crypto. And so that's why we have set the 50% LTV. Whether this will change in the future as we get more experience, it might. There's a likelihood that our risk model will be modified to be able to handle the market in different ways. This is also one of the reasons why we have the MELD staking, because it's an insurance policy against black swan events. So we're trying to do everything we possibly can to mitigate these liquidation events. And in regards to a person who wants to take out a loan, I think that having this 50% LTV is kind of the starting point for their journey into this space. A lot of these protocols will give you, 70, 80, 90% LTV, where you have, 5 or 10% market adjustment on the asset, and you're liquidated, and they have your crypto. Goodbye, done. I think that their intent is different than ours. Our intent is to create a balanced protocol where all sides can make money. And to do that, we need to minimize liquidation events, not maximize liquidation events, which will then give you kind of a short-term gain. So that's kind of the thinking. But I don't know if it really answered your question, probably because we haven't launched the protocol, so I don't have any kind of anecdotal, real-world comments that I can use.
Yeah, I have some friends here in the States that have used BlockFi. I've used BlockFi as well, but I haven't done a loan through them. I have one friend who did, and it was great when he took it out. It was in March, I think, and he was just in a different position with his crypto holdings. And then he did face some potential liquidation emails that were coming. And the only thing that saved him was the market turning back around and kind of going back up and bailing him out a little bit. So two things come to mind. One is, again, I keep referring back to this, mythical average person, that the average person just working a job, having money in a bank, maybe investing in stocks or some other, very basic financial products. We're entering into a space where it is more complex. There's new rules involved, and there are some dangers that it might look really good on paper, and BlockFi or whoever is really advertising because that's their business, marketing what a great opportunity this is. But for the average person who doesn't necessarily take the time to understand how it's operating, when those liquidation events occur, X, Y, and Z, what's in the fine print, it could be a place where there's some difficult lessons learned by those that aren't paying attention. And the second part, I'm just curious your opinion on, is that because we are in a space that is largely unregulated, and someone can create a DeFi product and put a big marketing site together and have a cool team or whatever, but they're maybe more predacious. Maybe they are setting up a situation where they are going to be liquidating people more often. What advice do you have for people about this space? Maybe what are some of the things that frustrate you about some of the other scams and things that we just know go on here, and how it makes hard for people like you who are well-meaning to legitimize and make this a safe place for people to bring their assets?
I think that you have this saying that a negative comment will last for 7 times longer than a positive comment in social media. And so I think in that perspective, there are definitely rug pulls, and I've sort of been affected or been a victim of rug pulls. But I think by and large, from my experience, at least on Cardano, the vast majority of the projects are very, very well-meaning. We're not in a position where you were in June on Binance Smart Chain, where you had 50, 100 coins coming out every day. So I think that in that sense, a lot of the community works very hard to try and dig as deep and as hard as they can into the team to try to sort of mitigate some of these problems. But think about it also this way: if you're running a whole bunch of liquidations, right? Liquidation sits on one side of the fence. Liquidation sits on the borrower side, right? So you're taking the value that exists for that particular loan, you're liquidating it, and you're getting it back. But what that means from the lender side is the interest payments stop, right? No more interest payments. And so it's not of benefit to the lender in order to support that type of behavior, unless there's some real nefarious pricing model. And we all know that sort of in the crypto space, everybody focuses very much on their ability to make money or save money, or it's all very, very sort of focused on this return. And so I think if you have this, you see this in the traditional sort of world, the fiat world, where you have people that can't get a loan, and they are, getting credit cards that have 30, 50, 80, 100%. I've seen in the UK, I saw a billboard that advertised over 800% interest on a loan. So it's a bit different in the fiat space. In the case of crypto, we're so hell-bent on getting that profit or getting that percentage of those 6 extra points of yield or something, that I think that you're not going to find these heavy price gouging. You might find them in the very, very short term, but then they will disappear very quickly because of the such massive levels of bad press. In in the case of a kind of a last resort product, you'll probably start to see more in the crypto space, more sort of 85, 90%, 100% LTV type of products, but they will be CeFi. They won't be DeFi, in my opinion, because DeFi, they will just be, they'll be torn to pieces by the DeFi community for their attitude. So in this sense, I would actually say that, and I haven't really thought about this before, but at least on Cardano, and I'm guessing that it's quite similar, if not even more in Ethereum, the DeFi community is infinitely more aggressive than regulators would be. They're, relentless, detail-oriented. They will work day and night to go to pick up every stone. I had some guy come after me for changing the last word in my Twitter description, my personal Twitter description. I don't even remember what it was. It was like from industry to finance or something. I did this, like I changed the description like a month or two before we started Meld publicly. And somebody sort of found this out and they sort of just came after me. You changed your Twitter profile to finance. You didn't do finance before, April, blah, blah, blah. So they're going to come after you in every tiny little way. And it's very frustrating and it sucks. And, when it's totally unfounded, then it's a pain. But by and large, it's people being highly critical towards the product in order to make sure that things are self-regulated and the best product comes out at the end.
Earlier, you made a comment about this space in particular, DeFi, holding some of the most exciting innovation that you've ever seen, potentially. Mm-hmm. So maybe dig into that a little bit deeper. I'm curious for you in this community that's really passionate about it. What's the impact that you're really trying to drive in the world for people living their lives? How do you see DeFi in improving the human experience or enabling us to do things that we simply can't do today? Maybe go into what that future looks like and what you're excited about bringing into the world.
I mean, it's on a high level. I just want to be able to provide all of the financial instruments that exist to bear for all people. I want to de-stratify financial instruments. I want a kid who has an idea to have access to the same financial instrument that somebody who's running a Goldman Sachs desk does. Because what you'll see, in my opinion, you'll see really, really exciting innovation in the space. And that's what sort of really fires me up about the whole thing. It has secondary repercussions. These are repercussions that mean that you'll start to see more financial independence from people that are currently have zero financial independence. You'll have, a lot of, what do you call it? A lot of like advertising that is going to sort of muddy the water among people that are not familiar with crypto and trying to get people into something that would be kind of pseudo crypto or semi crypto or CeFi. So there'll be bad stuff as well, but I think in general, giving these instruments to everybody so that you can level the playing field when it comes to financial tools is what I want to do. It's what I wake up in the morning for.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's a vision that I think a lot of us share. I'm curious though, when you talk about leveling a playing field, right now the playing field is not level and it benefits certain individuals more than others. Where do you see potential battlefronts forming? Who wants to undermine this future that you're talking about, and what are you preparing to kind of do to fight those fights?
So we're focusing very much on not taking a sort of an adversarial approach. We are crossing the bridge. So we are working with banks. Banks are not the boogeyman. Banks are, made up of people. We have relationships with banks. We work with bankers. Our bank oracle will connect to banks. If we can do this in the most sort of professional way, then banks will get on board. Banks will work with you. They have the same set of goals that you do. If you can provide the vision, they might not have that sort of view, but if you can provide that view and sort of lay the groundwork, which is part of the reason why we're talking about 2025, 2026, they'll participate. If we're talking about banks as liquidity providers, and we can give them a good, consistent, steady yield or interest rate, then this is an opportunity for them to replace their assets in the bond market, which is, slowly but surely going into negative yield. And so we're not seeing it as, we're out to get the banks or we're sort of attacking them or anything like that at all. We're focusing on a different space. We're being highly, highly innovative, or we're trying to be highly innovative. And at the same time, we're sort of reaching across the aisle to be able to talk to them and be able to work with them and build these tools so that they can provide liquidity into the space and they can get the sort of the requirements that they need in order to safely operate this. And so that way we can sort of take it step by step forward.
I appreciate that. It's funny. I think that just living in the United States, I tend to have the feeling that innovation is often kneecapped by larger interests who then come in and kind of backfill what was started by the more grassroots people. That's happened in a number of different spaces. And eventually, there's roll-ups and places that start really innovative and, seeing a big vision end up becoming part of the status quo in the system as well. But I appreciate that outlook, because I think you're right. You can't affect major change by attacking a previous system. The best way is to make that change from the inside, move towards common interests, and especially when those benefit people that are, lacking access to capital, lacking access to seeing their dreams come true. If you can tether that up with the interests of the kind of institutions or the existing power structures, that's a really intelligent way to approach it. Just a couple more questions, and I know that we're at about an hour here, but we did want to talk a little bit more about Cardano specifically. It sounds like that was a community that you got in because your co-founder was already, developing with Haskell and kind of in that space. But maybe talk about what you see in Cardano that is different from Ethereum, not just from the technical side, but from the community that exists there, the types of projects, and what it's like to actually be one of these, as you called it, primitives developing in the Cardano ecosystem.
I think that there isn't really much of a roadmap for what it is that we're doing. We have what has been done in Ethereum, but the way that it's going forward, things are changing all the time. You have this infrastructure bill, which is creating all kinds of, noise and inflection and things like that. I think that this idea of a primitive is a fundamental, it's probably because of my sort of background as a designer. So as a designer, if I make something, let's say I'm a typographer, yeah? And if I design a typeface, the most exciting thing for me is when I see someone using my typeface in a way I never intended to use it. That is a mark of quality, in that you've created something that other people can take much farther than you ever were able to gain or sort of be a part of your vision. And that's kind of the goal for both Hai and myself. And we've talked about this in the past, that if we can make a primitive in a way that people shock and surprise how they use it, and it sort of goes well beyond its design intent, then we will have been able to have been a contributor to the overall community. And this is kind of really a lot of what it comes down to, is trying to be a part of this community. One of the things you didn't talk about, but I think is kind of relevant in this, in the sort of primitive conversation, is ETH versus Cardano, the sort of maximalist narrative, where you have people on both sides that are very, very, you know, staunch in their perspective. But from our perspective, and from a lot of people we talk to, the focus is not, or should not, and will not be about the L1s, but it'll be about L2s and L3s. It'll be about the applications that sit on top of, you know, Cardano and Bitcoin and Ethereum and Solana and whoever else. And in the same way, somebody, I don't remember who it was, they sort of used the analogy of a video game. You know, big successful video games like Uncharted or GTA that come out, they don't come out on one platform. They come out across multiple platforms. It's the game that is relevant. Is the game good? Not is Xbox good or is, you know, PlayStation good? And I think that over time we'll see this, and we'll see this kind of maximalist sort of thaw out to a degree. And then that's really kind of what we want to see beyond the composability in the Cardano space, is being able to do this composability through all of DeFi. And this is partially why we are working with Vent and Polygon to develop this Polygon Cardano bridge. So we're building a Polygon network-based bridge from Ethereum to Cardano and back, because Polygon has the same kind of capital efficiency we have. And if we do this well and it's bi-directional, it means that, you know, we can play nice with everybody. And that's really what we're trying to get to with this composability. I mean, that sort of goes back to my first point. If somebody builds something that uses, you know, Alchemix and Meld, or Curve and Meld, God, that would be a major, major milestone in my opinion. I mean, that would make me so happy, because, you know, that means we're able to contribute to the whole of DeFi instead of just Cardano.
Yeah, that all those sentiments are amazing, and it is amazing when you can put something into the world that becomes a small piece of someone else's creation. It's like your own canvas, your own life is sort of extended in ways that you couldn't have done alone. So it's really refreshing to hear that, aside from the sales websites and aside from just the general noise and conversation about DeFi, that it's people like you behind the scenes that are doing this out of a life of experience and passion and skill. And at the end of the day, you want to contribute meaningfully to this world that we live in, and give people tools that help that 16-year-old in his basement take an idea to an actual product or something, using a financial tool that never would have been available previously. So this is the type of stuff that more and more I'm really sinking my teeth into in crypto. I'm a little burnt out on just the buying and trading market aspect that everyone seems fixated on. And so I really appreciate you taking some time to show a little bit behind the scenes of how these projects are coming together, what the intent is, and that there's good people out there doing good things.
Well, there was one, when we were writing the white paper and doing our research, there was one statistic that stood out, you know, way above all the others. And that was that 20% of all crypto investors are under the age of 18. So think about that. How utterly amazing is that?
Ken, and speaking about
Sorry?
about that,
Yeah.
Just had a question on minimum loan amounts. Like when we're talking about dealing with younger kids and people with less resources, will there be minimum loan amounts, and or how does Meld plan to attack sort of the micropayments problem? I mean, I know it's mostly lending and borrowing, but with your products such as the debit card, et cetera.
So minimum amounts, yes, there will probably be some kind of a minimum amount in regards to the loan, but we're talking very, very small amounts. We're not talking large, I don't know what it is. So, if I give you a number now, I'm probably going to somebody's going to try to hold me to it. But my guess is it's probably somewhere around $10 or something like that. In regards to a minimum amount for the smart contract loan, right? Or for the smart contract collateralization. In regards to the using of the debit card, I don't know at this point in time. I can't imagine that. Well, actually, I don't know. There might be some sort of a minimum amount in the debit card, but I don't know that space in detail well enough to be able to give any hard comments on it.
For sure, but we're just using, the Cardano network, their native tokenization that keeps transaction fees low, et cetera, et cetera.
Correct. So the goal is to focus on capital efficiency. It's the goal. You have use cases where, okay, I have been investing. I'm from Germany. I have a portfolio of $4 million, and I want to buy a house, and that's great and that's fantastic. But you also have a guy in Nigeria who has, 0.33 of a Bitcoin, and he sees that 0.33 of a Bitcoin as his future. And under no circumstance will he sell it. And we want to be able to allow that person to safely stay long and be able to borrow against that to do whatever they need to do in a way that, we're focusing on non-liquidation sort of posture, so that in the community, it's known that Meld is not sort of a predator in the space in regards to try and take your Bitcoin, but is an enabler in the space to try and make it possible to provide some degree of liquidity in as safe a way as possible. So that's sort of in scale. In order to do those things at both levels, you have to have super high capital efficiency, and that's kind of the sort of the at least the initial thinking or the initial fire behind choosing of Cardano.
Yeah, it's amazing the tools that now exist in the world to enable this type of transaction. And even just coming from the traditional world where it takes days sometimes to move money between banks and the fees are ever present. The fact that Cardano seems to be, and a lot of these other protocols and blockchains as well, built from the ground up to enable this type of activity at a scale that we've never really seen before is incredibly exciting.
You have this. You can see this in a very small way. So we just announced a partnership with Occam Finance, and the Occam Finance conversation started through a dialogue or through an idea from someone in our community, and what they proposed was in Occam. Occam is a Cardano launchpad, as well as other things. But in the Cardano launchpad side of things, the amount of OCC tokens you have defines the tier that you're part of, and each tier provides you with the ability to invest more into a specific new project. And so what this user proposed was, what if we were able to take ADA and lock it up and borrow OCC tokens against it in order to get more OCC tokens to go into a higher tier that then allows them to, invest in new projects. This is not something that we'd ever thought of. We didn't, expect that it would be used this way. This was proposed by a user, and it was proposed to Occam, and they thought it was interesting. And then this person told us about it. And then that was the starting point for the partnership, in addition to other things. But that was the kind of initial thought process, and this is what we're trying to get to. And the fact that you can do this and do this in a very, very efficient way means that these ideas that people have can become reality very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, even hearing you talk about how quickly it sounds like this project went from concept to team to being a primitive in the space, it's amazing at how quickly things can turn into reality when you have a team behind them. So I guess I'm curious, and maybe just kind of wrapping it up here so that we have the chance to edit this and get it back over to you. I'm curious, in coming in and talking to people like us and talking to the community at large, what's the big takeaway? What's the message or your intent in being here, sharing your excitement about Meld? What's the thing to leave the audience with that you hope everyone walks away and remembers?
I think that the big takeaway is we're at a point now where the ability to create new type of financial instruments that open up a new world to everybody, we're at that early stage, that sort of initial explosion of innovation, and anybody can be a part of it. Anybody can come and think of new ideas and figure out how to do them. Anybody can use these kinds of things in the way that they want to use them. So, open up your idea box and look at these different protocols and talk to them, and just use them to be able to solve whatever specific problem you have, not the problem that they're necessarily advertising for. And you're going to hit upon something that is going to help you in whatever sort of issue you're trying to deal with or whatever your financial goals are. So go and experiment, go use them, go play with them, and you'll end up making something new like this user provided.
That's awesome. Bandito, do you have any burning thoughts here at the end?
By the way, that person that suggested that was Joris.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I believe it.
No, I think you've answered all of our questions. Thank you so much, Ken, for being with us today. We really look forward to bringing Meld project to our community. Super. I'm just really glad you guys were interested in and hearing me talk about it. So to be sort of straight, sort of on more of a personal level to your previous question, I like doing these things because it makes me sharper. It makes me, none of this stuff is pre-canned. I'm thinking about it on the fly, and I'm talking about it on the fly, which sometimes I end up getting foot and mouth disease, but that's just the way it goes. But, if I can't answer these questions on the fly based on whatever you guys have, and sort of you haven't sort of shared anything with me, then I'm not doing my job. I'm not sharp enough. I'm not on the ball. I'm not paying attention. I'm not doing my job as being a co-founder of this platform. And so these questions help me a lot in sparking new thoughts and in sort of honing my ideas, because I have to be able to both answer them, but I have to answer them in an honest way. Well, I think you've done both of those exceptionally well today. You're very sharp. That comes across. And I'm curious, who else in this space inspires you? Oh God. Who else should we be talking to? Badger DAO. I love Badger DAO. I think the Badger DAO guys are amazing. Yeah, they're fantastic. Alchemix is a super, just nuts. I really like that. And sort of on the most ironic level, Bankless. So I can trace most of my thinking back to Bankless. I listened to Bankless like incessantly for a really long time, and the Bankless guys, they absolutely loathe Cardano. Oh, really? I've never heard them use the word Cardano on their show. I've heard them one time use the word ADA. I've never heard them actually use the word Cardano.
So it's unfortunate because I think they're brilliant guys. I think that they're super sharp, utterly inspiring, and they have, if anybody wants to get into crypto, from my perspective, listen to Bankless. Listen to lots and lots of Bankless. So they've sort of massively inspired me. And Badger DAO, I think, is really brilliant. What is it called? Economic Engineering. Lisa, I don't know what her last name is. She's a YouTube channel about tokenomics, but then we're sort of getting into like really kind of rabbit hole type stuff. So she just does, long form whiteboard sort of narratives about tokenomics, how does Bancor work and why does this particular token economic doesn't work, and all this kind of stuff. So those are sort of some of the people that I really look to and I really enjoy. I'm going to talk to Lisa for the first time, hopefully next week. And so that's one of the big benefits of doing what we're doing, and our success is we're starting to get to the point where I'm starting to get to the point. Hai's already been there. Hai sort of talks to all these guys all the time because he's been sort of in the game, sort of on the ground floor for so long. But I haven't. And so the ability to start to talk to these people is really kind of, it's good because we're able to sort of have really interesting conversations about what we're doing, and we're able to sort of throw ideas around and go in different directions. And that's really kind of what it comes down to.
Awesome. Well, again, we can't thank you enough for taking some time with us.
Yeah, no problem.
We'll be watching and following closely, and yeah.
Super, I appreciate it. Where are you guys located?
I'm in northern Colorado.
Colorado, okay.
And I'm in British Columbia.
You're in BC, okay, gotcha. So it's
And
early morning for you guys?
It's morning, yeah.
Yeah.
Not too bad. It's almost noon.
Yeah.
But yeah, crypto, I mean, it's a global community. So in our community, we have people all over the earth. It's always fun to try and schedule something. It's like throwing a dart at Swiss cheese from across the room to hit a time that works.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Zagreb, Australia, and British Columbia, or Mountain Time. So, all right. But it was very nice meeting both of you, and have a good day. And if you need anything else, or you have any other questions, or something didn't work out in regards to the recording, just let me know and we can chat again.
Oh, crap. I didn't hit record. Just kidding. All right, you guys. Have a good day. We'll talk to you soon.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.